Hello, I'm Steve Brown, and I'm a lecturer in TESOL at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. And the title of this presentation is Nothing to be Scared of: Social Justice, Language Education, and ELT Methodology. So, as we all know, the world is very divided right now. For many of us, the concept of social justice is entirely positive. It's about freedom, fairness, peace, love, and understanding, all those nice things. Um, but a lot of other people feel threatened by the concept of social justice. There are some increasingly loud discourses that seek to challenge social justice and the various different movements that are associated with it. Um, and of course, people who are opposed to social justice as a concept, some of these people are currently occupying positions of tremendous political power. So there is a polarization with regard to perceptions of social justice. And then if we consider the idea of social justice being promoted in education, there's a similar divide. For many of us, it seems natural and logical that educators should be concerned with developing their students' capacities to advocate for a freer and a fairer society. But for others, the idea of bringing social justice issues into the classroom amounts to a kind of brainwashing, a means of indoctrinating learners into a worldview that they find sinister and evil. So I've found that a lot of people who work in English language teaching are also uh, really quite skeptical of social justice as a thing, as an approach. A lot of teachers that I've spoken to are very reluctant to incorporate it into their practice for various reasons. Maybe they don't see it as part of their job description, or they worry that their students will react negatively to it, or it could lead to some kind of heated discussion that'll derail their lesson plan, or they're just too busy trying to cover everything else that's in the syllabus. And another reaction that I've heard quite a lot from English language teachers is that they just simply don't know how to go about it, as they weren't trained to teach in a social justice oriented way, and there's no clear method out there for them to follow. So it's this skepticism among English language teachers about how to go about teaching social justice, or how to go about taking a social justice oriented approach to ELT that I want to address in this presentation. So first of all, let's just try and have a very quick look at some of the key features of English language teaching and how it generally works. So to begin with, it normally follows a prescriptive approach where the syllabus, the materials, the outcomes are all decided in advance, or dictated in the syllabus or dictated in a book. And usually that happens without any consultation with the students. Secondly, it tends to follow a linear syllabus, a linear model, a synthetic or atomistic syllabus where the language is presented item by item. And the idea is that the students will build up their language proficiency step by step, with all the students learning the same language at the same time. And another key feature is a tendency to avoid what's known as parsnip topics. That's politics, alcohol, religion, sex, narcotics, isms, and pork. The main reason for this is that so many of our materials are published for a global market. So there's a tendency to avoid anything that could potentially be offensive in some context or for some cultures. And then a fourth feature of ELT is the concept of the English-only classroom, which is often regarded as something that teachers should be aspiring to. And this, of course, means that the first language, the student's first language, is not included in the learning process, and students are instead encouraged to use English all the time and even think in English. So I'll very briefly outline what's wrong with all of this, if I can. So an obvious problem with prescriptivism is that the students have no say in what they learn or how they learn it. And inevitably, if the content was decided in advance, much of it is going to lack relevance to their needs, and it creates a loss of agency, which is disempowering. The linear model of learning may seem logical, but in fact, it's completely out of step with widely accepted theories of second language acquisition. People don't all just learn language at the same speed and in the same order that it's taught. Language acquisition is far messier than this, and the linear approach just doesn't accommodate the messiness of it. Of course, the avoidance of parsnip topics also means the avoidance of social justice topics, right? Social justice education is inherently political, and it deals with topics like sexism, racism, homophobia. It's very unlikely that you'll find any of these topics in an ELT course book. And finally, the phenomenon of the English-only classroom might be handy if you're a native English-speaking teacher and you don't know your students L1, but it devalues the benefits of multilingualism and translanguaging in the language learning process. And it also leads to a loss of student identity if they're not allowed to draw on their own language to help them to communicate in the classroom. So the thing is, so much of what goes on in English language teaching runs counter to what the research tells us. Instead of English-only classrooms, we should be encouraging our students to draw on their full linguistic repertoires through translanguaging. And instead of a linear syllabus, we should be taking a more holistic approach to language and language teaching. Instead of prescribing content, we should be involving students in creating it. Rather than selecting items of language in advance, we should be clarifying language for our students at the point where they actually need to use it. And there's also research to suggest that taking students outside of their comfort zone or challenging them with topics that require them to reflect critically on their own views can promote effective learning. These ideas are well documented and widely accepted as good practice when it comes to language teaching. So I guess what all of this means is that we need to approach ELT differently. We need an approach that is supported by research, one that facilitates the use of the L1, encourages the use of English as a lingua franca, that offers more flexibility in terms of language focus, that gives students more power and autonomy in the learning process, an approach that allows students to engage meaningfully with real issues that affect them. So, if only we had an approach to language teaching that contained all of these features. Well, I'd like to suggest that we do, and it's this. Now, I don't mean the heavily sanitized and commercialized PPP kind of version of communicative language teaching that dominates the profession today. I'm talking about a return to the basic principles of communicative language teaching when it was first developed in the 1970s. As we know, in communicative language teaching, meaning is paramount, more important than accuracy. And it's all about students being able to express their own ideas. Back when communicative language teaching was first developed, a high priority was given to negotiation, as this was seen as an important means of ensuring that learning was relevant to the students' needs. Humanism had a big influence on communicative language teaching, recognizing each learner as an individual, encouraging their personal development. And also, contrary to what some people think, when it was first popularized, CLT allowed the judicious use of the student's L1 as a means to facilitate learning. So now, if you compare some of these principles or features of communicative language teaching with some of the key features of social justice language education, I think we can identify a lot of parallels. Right? Meaning is key to social justice education too. The curriculum is co-created with the students, and topics and issues are prioritised over specific language items. The principles of humanism, the development of the whole person, tie in nicely with the development of critical consciousness, which of course is a key aim in social justice language education. And of course, allowing the use of languages other than English emancipates learners from that position of deficit that they're made to feel when the native speaker models are being idealized. So I guess what I'm saying here is that communicative language teaching, or at least the principles that are advocated in the stronger versions of communicative language teaching, is highly compatible with the social justice oriented approach to language education. And in fact, in his 2015 book, Second Language Acquisition and Task-Based Language Teaching, Michael Long aligned his version of task-based language education to previous educational approaches that are grounded in the principles of anarchism. He said that these principles included educating the whole person, learning by doing, rationalism, free association, learner-centeredness, egalitarian teacher-student relationships, and participatory democracy. Now, I think these principles are very similar to the principles that we'd expect to apply in social justice language education. Arguably then, if we're looking for a way of implementing social justice language education in ELT, we don't really need to look any further than the strong versions of CLT that most English language teachers are already familiar with. Things like task-based language teaching, dogme, or content-based instruction. Now, a further thing that I think is worth mentioning at this point is that the way in which social justice language education has been stifled by organizations who wield a lot of power and influence in ELT. These institutions are sometimes known as the TEFL Hydra, a mythical multi-headed beast that is notoriously difficult to fight against. These institutions are motivated primarily by profit, so educational quality is not their number one priority by definition. And this means that they will happily promote models of teaching that are not effective if it means they can maintain a healthy profit. Michael Long and Jeff Jordan's book, English Language Teaching Now and How It Could Be, presents in some depth what's wrong with English language teaching. And they make this point. They say, given the size of the current ELT industry, it's not surprising that those interested in perpetuating the status quo should use their considerable power to ensure that ELT continues to be organized in the way we've described. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge that a lot of what happens in ELT these days is hegemonic. We've been led to believe by those who control the industry that a strong communicative approach, which is highly compatible with social justice language education and closely aligned with current research, is somehow a bad idea. So I want to conclude by encouraging English language teachers to stop being afraid or skeptical of social justice language education. We've been conditioned to believe that it's a bad idea, but it's only a bad idea in terms of its commercial viability. When it comes to research about language teaching and learning, it's actually a very good idea indeed. And the best thing is, when it comes to methodology, we don't have to look any further than the core principles of communicative language teaching, which we're already familiar with. So there really is nothing to be scared of. So here are my references, and if you'd like to contact me, you can do so by email or through one of my social media profiles, which you can see here. So thanks very much for watching.